the commonalities are far larger than the differences, and we already have agencies who are well equipped to handle submarine construction overall and focus towards nuclear submarine construction. I think it is a matter of expanding the capability that we have to get and task an agency for conventional submarine design and construction as well. And once we've taken that decision as a country, I think it's a short step away from achieving the ultimate goal.
There's another way that one can also, at least to an extent, distribute this design load, and that is getting industry involved. Okay. If we ask industry also that if you form a partnership with a major sort of company and say that you do the basic design, etc., the design concept, but the detailed designing, etc., you hive off to industry to quite an extent. That will. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Dabolim Dialogues. Today, I'm delighted to have as my guest Vice Admiral Sanjay Mahindru. Sanjay and I go back a long way. Fellow submariners, and have served in many positions together. Sanjay has got an illustrious career. He, of course, in his younger years commanded INS Shalki, earning himself a Nausaina medal. Amongst, I would say, his most memorable, tenures would have been the long time he spent as a commissioning commanding officer of INS Arihant, India's first ballistic missile nuclear submarine. So I think you were associated with the program for a long time and saw it right through its gestation, and finally in a commissioning prolonged period, if I'm not mistaken, that you were there. After that, of course, Sanjay has fielded many other key assignments. He was the Deputy CNC of the Strategic Forces Command, and then finally retired as the Deputy Chief of Naval Staff. So Sanjay, I think having been associated with the building of submarines, there's not much difference between conventional and nuclear submarines, from a building standpoint at least. We will focus our discussion today on the conventional part of it, on conventional submarines. And while we have, they are in the news these days, of course, because of the 75 India or the Scorpion Plus program, numbers are abysmally short, and I think we are in a pretty precarious situation right now insofar as undersea warfare goes, at least on the conventional fleet side. So insofar as building goes, where do you think we stand right now, and what are our true capabilities?
Firstly, thank you. So thank you for having me on the Dabolim Dialogues. I've been closely following it, and it's always a pleasure to interact and share notes with you. I always go back enriched and more equipped to handle these issues in the future. Certainly, like you said, the present shortage or lower force levels of conventional submarines is a matter of great concern for the Navy and for us as a nation. But I think it is a short-term aberration as we are going through now. Our experience with the conventional submarine building was actually very foresighted if you went back to the 1980s. And like you're aware, 1980s was when we got the first HDW contract going, in which 2 of the 4 boats were to be made in MDL. And we did that. I think it took slightly longer than we expected them to make, but by 91, 92, we had both Shalki and Shankul commissioned. And we repeated this experience with the next order of conventional submarines, that was the Scorpions, the Kalveri class, which we signed the contract somewhere in the early 2000s, and by the first decade of 2000s, we started rolling them out. So our experience in conventional submarine building has been to be a licensed producer with largely getting a license from a foreign OEM, using their equipment fit, and getting the construction part cleared by them or validated by them.
Right.
In some cases, we were trained also to a certain extent, but that is the extent of what we have done as far as conventional submarine building goes, and that's where we are today. And like you said, we are on the brink of the 75 India, and I hope that happens very quickly. But I think it's a long way ahead for us to create the agencies. I won't say the capabilities, I would rather focus on the agencies to build conventional submarines. So, I mean, that's my answer to you.
Yeah, so I mean, what really is lacking right now? If we've already been in the business of building nuclear submarines, one would assume that largely conventional submarines are a subset of a nuclear submarine. I mean, the complexity is far lower, the size is smaller, equipment is largely similar, propulsion train, of course, is far simpler. So in that sense, I would assume that a large part of the capabilities already exist in the country. So why are we still finding it difficult to make the transition into building our own submarines to our own design right now?
I'll take your last point on own design.
Yeah.
First, I think that's a crying need, sir. In our experience, which we mentioned earlier, getting the German design from IKL, then getting the French design from the naval group, submarines are designed largely for the requirement of a country. And we've seen, for example, the Australians feel that they need longer legs. They've always felt. Similarly, in our case, our choke points are relatively further than certain countries like the French or the Scandinavians or whosoever make. So submarines are made to meet a country's requirement. That is the first step on that. So we have to then create our own design. The DND SDG that we got, which was created in 1985, today is highly capable, but it has a few limitations. It is manned by naval officers. Traditionally, design bureaus or design cells are manned by people who can provide immense continuity of almost, I would say, a quarter of a century or even more, and they are specialists in their systems. While we have done a great job on the nuclear side and done very well, but I think on the design side, firstly, we need to create an organization which has continuity and numbers. The numbers presently in DND SDG are not sufficient to meet this requirement to create your own designs.
Over and above what they're already doing.
Over and above. So our hands are full, sir. Like you're aware, we are doing the next SSBN, we are doing SSN designs. We will be involved in whatever happens in 75 India. And on top of that, we are designing our own conventional submarine. So the whole spectrum of submarine design is being looked after by a very small number of officers who are not there continuously. They have to meet other service requirements. So I think firstly, creating this design is critically important as we get into this conventional submarine design area. The second issue is of tasking. We haven't tasked any agency, whether within the Navy or outside the Navy, to make conventional submarines. I think it was a great foresight that somebody showed in creating the ATV. We know who are the people who are there. But in the creation of the ATV, using the DRDO norms to develop a technology platform, I think was groundbreaking in that sense. And since we had tasked ATV for that purpose, while it may have taken slightly longer, and I emphasize on the slightly, we may have taken slightly longer in this journey to achieve our nuclear triad and sea-based deterrence, but finally it did happen. Now, if you don't have an agency tasked with it, then you are doing somebody else's job, which is actually nobody's job. The directorates in naval headquarters, not trying to pry on what is on the verge of confidentiality, but are premised towards acquisition, contract management. Design takes a much bigger number of people. For instance, the ATV has a full army of people working on it and many sub-centers who make this possible. For example, equipment development. As you do design, it is critical to do equipment development, because no design can progress unless I have the basic dimensions of the equipment that I'm going to fit. And it's an iterative process. The designer and the developer keep talking to each other to develop this capability. Now, on the conventional submarine side, this doesn't exist. So then you remain dependent on somebody else's design. And if you take his design, then you have to take his equipment as well, which is a never-ending spiral downwards, and exactly what we don't want if we want to go towards Atmanirbharta. So that is my point on this. The third point on why we have not been able to do it is an artificial separation that we have created between the nuclear building, submarine building, and the conventional submarine building. And like you rightly brought out, the differences, while do exist, but they are not major. I mean, the propulsion package is different, the weapon package will certainly be different, and they can be kept separate. You don't need to merge those two. But
Actually, large part of the weapons will also be similar.
the tube
front
launch,
end, yeah,
the
yeah.
tube launch will certainly be the same. It is only in the vertical launch, but today we've seen, sir, even in the conventional boats with the KSS-3, they are all going in for vertical launched, semi-ballistic or depressed ballistic trajectories. So it is not something that we cannot look at. I mean, I think that is a great positive that we already have in our quiver, and we should use that whenever we design our own conventional submarine as well. So the commonalities are far larger than the differences, and we already have agencies who are well equipped to handle submarine construction overall and focus towards nuclear submarine construction. I think it is a matter of expanding the capability that we have to get and task an agency for conventional submarine design and construction as well. And once we've taken that decision as a country, I think it's a short step away from achieving the ultimate goal and stop import of, it hurts all our submariners because, so when you are aware, when you get a submarine, you don't buy a submarine. I buy a submarine, I also get his training pedagogy because he has worked a submarine based on what is the input of the people. Yeah. Are they diploma holders? What is their school standards of education, college standards of education? I get his logistic chain. I have to integrate that. I get his operational, because he has made his boat for his operational requirements. I have to understand and then modify that to meet my operational requirements. So the kind of shock that the submarine arm faces every time you import a new type of submarine. So we've done the Russians, we've done the Germans, we've got the French, and if we get another one again, I don't know from whichever country, it will be another shock, and it takes almost a decade for the arm to stabilize this. And you're integrating training cycles, maintenance is another thing. Every country faces their or makes their own maintenance philosophy. Now we have to modify that. All the MTBFs, all the routines are made according to their requirements. We have to modify that and try to bring it in line with what we've been doing with the other submarines. So the load of importing a submarine is a 30 to 35 year dependence on another country and a phenomenal amount of integration load that we take on ourselves, which keeps us from operational tasks. Finally, the same people are operating the boats and maintaining the boats. Now we task them with these additional things like the flag officer submarines gets overwhelmed by managing the manpower requirements, the training requirements, the maintenance requirements of all these different types of boats. So the earlier we're able to get our own system in place, the better off we will be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's really well put, Sanjay, because I mean, we've all seen this, of managing numerous types of platforms, the entire logistics strain, and all that comes even at a cost. I mean, there's a huge cost implication for all that. So your costing also goes right through the roof when you're managing such a large number of platforms. In fact, one good example I would say in this respect is the Koreans, where they stuck to one builder. Absolutely. First with the 209s or the KSS-1. Then they went for the 214s or the KSS-2, 9 of each, pretty large numbers of each. And then they've broken out on their own with the KSS-3, so it's all graduated, whereas we have got, for a variety of reasons, maybe in those days we didn't want to put all our eggs into one basket. That was one reason. And the second is because of our procurement system also, which insists, all the time that we go multi-vendor, and it's always the L1 that you have to choose, and therefore, you don't have that much control as to whom you're going to build up a long-term partnership with in that respect. Absolutely. But you raise a number of other points also, and I particularly about people, the short tenures. In fact, what some people call as gen form designers, because all the time you're moving from one transfer to the next, and you have service requirements, and therefore you have to have your design agency populated with a reasonably large number of either veterans or civilians who have become truly experts in that. Absolutely. I had the opportunity once to visit Malakit, and I saw them. I mean, they had scientists over there who had, I think, decades of experience in building and designing boats. But let me ask you one more thing. So what I'm getting from you is largely because of the synergy in submarine design on the nuclear side of the house and the conventional side of the house. What you're suggesting is might be you capitalize on what you already have, your design organization, and expand it greater to take on this with specific tasking and a timeline. But there's another way that one can also, at least to an extent, distribute this design load, and that is getting industry involved. Yeah, if we ask industry also that if you form a partnership with a major sort of company and say that you do the basic design, etc., the design concept, but the detailed designing, etc., you hive off to industry to quite an extent. That will reduce the requirement of your own footprint in a government agency. And also I think maybe industry of course tends to be much more flexible in the way they can approach and hire and fire, in getting partnerships with outside, plugging technology gaps, etc. They're much more agile in this respect. So what would you have to say about that?
Can't agree with you more, sir. I mean, absolutely critical. And we are very fortunate actually that we have a very mature industrial or PSU, industrial defense PSU, and industrial ecosystem already existing in the country on submarine building and design for that matter. MDL, of course, we are mostly very well aware of. MDL has proven itself in 2 designs and is also now getting into maintenance, because the maintenance of the old Shishumar class is being now taken up by MDL. So they have proven themselves in this field very well. They have the inherent capability on submarine construction and maintenance. L&T, on the other hand, being another large player, has been involved with the nuclear submarine program for a long time, proven itself again, and a lot of the design load, because the numbers are small, have been done by L&T. Not on a permanent basis, but on a off and on basis, which I think is quite a sad thing, because you train these young, extremely talented naval architects who are civilians, but after a limited period of time, you have to let them go, because like your design is done generally in three stages, sir. So you do a conceptual design, you do a technical design, and then you have working level design. So largely what the industry has been doing is the working level design just before it goes into the shipyard, where the pipelines and the details are to be worked out on the hangars and the frames, etc. But even now, I think more and more they will move towards conceptual design, leaving the basic design with DND-SDG. They lay out meeting the SQRs of the Navy. That is what DND does, and then they can hive it off to the lower thing. We also got HSL, which has got again a mature understanding of submarine repair. HSL has never done submarine construction, but they have done very complex submarine repair tasks and done them really well in consonance with the Russian OEM. So again, so we have these 3 people who are well qualified in this area, sir. And I would say, going back slightly to the discussion that we had on this design agency, I would say a mixture of the naval expertise at DND-SDG with the substrate of the continuity being provided by the industry. Let's say we get 100 people from MDL, 100 people from L&T, some people from HSL, and keep the top level or whatever. I mean, some part which is movable or GenForm based, and another part which remains constant. I think that's a great mix to have without disturbing too much of the existing organization, so that the Navy doesn't have to dismantle their DND-SDG. We just expand the scope. And I think if we take this proposal in a firm manner, it will get accepted. It also helps us, we have to understand 1 or 2 things. You brought out the KSS thing, is that submarine building in a country like India, which is growing economically, we're going to be a $10 trillion economy. Submarine building is not a one-off. It is a continuum. So we have never taken submarine building as a continuum. Right. We always thought in 6s or 5s, or that's not the way submarine building works. Second thing is that when we get the industry involved and we start making designs, you have to think of exporting. We will sooner than later, especially in our area, I mean close to ourselves, the Bay of Bengal and the Arabian Sea, submarine operating navies will increase. And there is no one better than us with the amount of submarine operating experience and building experience we get to fill this gap. And I think that's a great area to fill in. Even your IPR issues for that matter. Now, if you made a submarine in DND-SDG, the IPR belongs to the Government of India. Informally, it's not formally put. But tomorrow, if I want to sell a boat to somebody, I will have these things worked out in this design bureau or group or cell or whatever I call it. So it is inherent and it is monetizable by the country. So if we have this capability, and like you said very rightly, it is a study in efficiency as far as the Koreans go. They never thought of it in sixes. They said 3 plus 3 plus 3. First looking at just the basic design, then getting into equipment, and now they're going to Canada, they're going to Saudi Arabia, they're going all over the world. I mean, I think Poland as well, where they're thinking of selling the submarines. And I think we've had this capability. I think within a very quick time, we can develop this capability ourselves. So I think these are the spin-offs that would happen if we get industry involved and integrated very cogently with the existing capabilities, and it would be win-win for both.
So I think also, the other spin-off to my mind is that submersibles by and large are not the sole propriety of the armed forces.
Absolutely.
I mean, the way things are going, you have a large number of agencies operating submersibles. And once you have your design data, etc., and your specifications and your standards sort of built up, then your entry into making submersibles of all types, progressively as we move on, undersea mining, etc., is going to take off in a big way. Laying of undersea cables, exploring for oil and gas, all these sort of places where the usage of undersea of UUVs or unmanned or sometimes tethered or even manned would, I think, is reaching a point that it's going to be fairly explosive growth that we're going to witness over here. So there'll be a direct spin-off over there as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Totally agree with you, sir. I mean, a phenomenal spin-off, and the importance of the oceans, we've been speaking about it, and the exploitation has, I think, just about started as far as we are concerned. We've seen China operating in these areas extensively, and we haven't covered possibly our part of the world as well as they have. So there's a crying need for exploration first, then exploitation of assets underwater, within the EEZ, beyond the EEZ. So it's a large world ecosystem which is going to develop, and the earlier we get into it, sir, the better. And in this area, of course, a lot of things like we were discussing robotics, like automation systems, and there is a need again to create a central agency possibly who can look at this growing demand. Where does the industry need it? Where does the telecom industry need it? The oil and natural gas industry need it? And the armed forces remain reliable and a substantial client on this, and putting all the requirements and making the base model, which can then spin off many products. I think that's is another need which can be looked at quite actively.
So we've covered a lot of ground. I thought we'd end with just one more space. I can understand, of course, that you're designing and making your own submarines, but submarines finally are large vessels which are populated with a large pieces of equipment, some big, some small, etc. So that ecosystem of all the equipment manufacturers, I mean, that's another chapter by itself. To people making propulsion system, motors, gearboxes, bearings, plumber blocks, pipelines and high pressure air bottles, compressors, all that sort of stuff. The entire MSME sector needs to be energized to do this all. So I think one spin-off, of course, is that if you're making your own submarines, you can have consistency in various classes of the equipment that is going into it. It might be scalable, of course, but you can scale it according to your own requirements. But any other ways that we can sort of energize this sector? Yeah.
No, absolutely, sir. So I'll just go back a little bit to the design issue first, because whatever we produce has to be based on some design specification. So in this central design bureau that we create, I think one of the first tasks they have to do, like you are aware, we are operating 3 to 4 types of submarines. Each uses HP air of a different pressure. Now that itself is a logistic load for the dockyard and for the manufacturers. It is very simple for the Navy to say, and we know that the Russians use pressure of a certain extent for certain purposes, the Germans use it for so, and the French use it, and that is their common standard which they use. We have to sit down and decide that hereinafter,
you come up with a domestic standard,
our domestic standards, and we are going to say that we are going to make boats, whether they be nuclear or conventional or whatever they may be, to meet this standard. Now, if there is an aberration required for some specific requirement, of course we can take that step. So once we do that, there are just about, I would say, 30 to 35 basic systems in a submarine. I do that since we are speaking about the HPI system. So you start from the compressor, you go down to the water remover, extractor, then you go down to the bottles, then you come back to reducers at different levels. Now, in this itself, I would count on about 40 to 50 MSMEs and OEMs getting involved in it of different levels. Compressors will be someone big, bottles will be someone smaller, reducers will be someone very specific and with great expertise. Now, with this kind of a system being put into place only for the HPS system, I have created a demand for perpetuity, because we will always need submarines, we will always need UUVs.
And with more or less the same specifications.
More or less, I mean, I would say exactly the same specifications. The size of the bottle may change, the capacity of the compressor may go up little here and there, but my reducers will operate generally, because the reducers are connected to some other equipment which is going to be pneumatically operated. So that forward integration or backward integration in one sense to that consumer itself, or that function, is also then stabilized, it is fixed. This will, the first step that designers have to do is to do this. And secondly, the question you asked was on developing this system. We've already, sir, I would say 80% of the basic systems of the submarines have already been cracked and established, supply chains established through the ATV program. Maybe big things like propulsion motors, battery technology, some very specific items which we need for conventional boats, which have not been covered in the nuclear boats, will take some time to achieve. But I think we have an extremely fertile and very motivated team, and I have worked with them being on Arihant, worked with them personally, and sometimes greatly impressed by their dedication and their commitment to what they are doing, although numbers are not very large. So I think if we open up this and create this commonality of systems and therefore commonality of equipment, we will face no problem at all in getting our MSMEs absolutely involved and integrated with our supply chain management.
And of course, the downstream effect would be lower logistics load, lower training load, lower maintenance load, because you have commonality across the fleet, and interchangeability. Also, so that makes it's a win-win for everyone.
Absolutely.
So I think we'll wind up over here. We've covered a lot of ground, so it remains for me to thank you. I mean, this is really interesting stuff, and I leave this conversation as an optimist, really, that there's a lot that needs to be done, of course, but we seem to be well poised, I would say, in all our the way that we are set up right now, to take that leap of faith, and move ahead, because at the end of the day, immunization is a strategic requirement. You have to sort of, there will be concomitant, I would say, cost reduction, but the basic requirement is that if everything is homegrown, then your dependencies are few and far in between. And therefore, your leeway to work and to operate your platform goes up exponentially, I would say, in that sense. So thanks again, Sanjay. Delightful conversation, and look forward to many such conversations in future.
Thank you so much. Thank you.